first question is, what is your name, what do you do, and at which reserve?
My name is Gray Hayes. I'm the Coastal Training Program Coordinator at the Elkhorn Slough National Estuarine Research Reserve.
And cut.
Rolling.
All right. I'll ask the question and count to 3. Why do you think collaboration is a good approach in coastal resource management?
Collaboration is a good approach in coastal resource management because the nature of coastal management in general is increasingly interdisciplinary and increasingly complex in a very rapidly changing world. And so in order to understand what is needed, we all have to be collaborative from an approach of asking our peers and people in other fields what they need to know. And so consulting with scientists who are constantly discovering new things, new trends in the world, and also asking those coastal resource managers what the latest thing they need to know is inherent in keeping up with coastal management.
And what up? Do you hear me now?
I do. Are you picking it up? Do you
No,
need to stop
no.
it? What up? Conference?
I'm sure nobody's been in there all week.
Okay. Why do you think collaboration is a good approach for coastal resource management?
On our area of the coast in Central California, we face extreme population pressure, very expensive real estate, and rapid growth. So our coastal resource managers are constantly trying to come to grips with the pressures of human society. For instance, we have a number of rare and endangered species, very extremely endangered ecosystems, processes like wildfire, sea level rise, that the science is changing on how to approach these things all the time. And the pressures from society are changing as well. Just about the time we think we've understood how to approach one of those problems, we get new information or new pressures. So it demands a constant feedback loop from a variety of different experts, policy, in natural sciences, social sciences, to actually tackle these problems well.
That was great. I'll ask the question again. What has your professional experience been with collaborative processes?
So, as a professional, I've worked with collaborative processes in a variety of ways. As a coastal training program coordinator, my work is grounded in collaborative processes. We constantly ask those decision makers who we're engaged with what information they need and how they would like to receive that information, who they'd like to hear from. And in order to get that information, it often involves speaking with researchers, scientists, and other experts. And we have to work with them to better understand what science there is to deliver to decision makers. And I'll say another thing, I'm also a researcher in grassland ecology. And as a researcher, professional, I often work in a collaborative process to make sure that what I find in ecology is delivered to grassland managers in California. And so that's the broad statement. Specifically, I'm involved with collaborative processes, protecting California's fire-adapted ecosystems, tidal wetlands, grasslands, many times rooted in specific ecosystems because I find people engage well with those. And they're around those systems, that's where the protection policies in California are. Repeat and everything.
Why do you think that collaboration, what has your professional experience been using collaboration?
So there are a variety of ways that as a professional I've been involved with collaboration. As a coastal training program coordinator, all of my work is grounded in a collaborative process. speaking with coastal decision makers about what kind of information they need to improve their decision making, and speaking with scientists about what kinds of information is most accurate, best information to transfer to those decision makers, and then working to link those two is really at the core of what the Coastal Training Program does. Specifically, with the Coastal Training Program, I've been involved with processes to better understand and improve management of tidal systems of California's rare grassland communities and the extremely endangered chaparral communities on California's coast. In each of those cases, decision makers are giving us feedback about the information they need to improve their policies and to enforce their policies, and scientists are engaged with research to answer those questions. As a grassland ecologist, I also work in collaborative processes for the last 20 years to make sure that grassland research that I and my team are doing is well transferred to grassland managers and policymakers that protect those rare systems. So as a researcher, I've been involved with many different ways of transferring that information in a collaborative way. As a grassland ecologist, I am embedded in collaborative processes all of the time in order to see my research be applied. And I generally do this through one methodology that I've found works really well, which is to take ranchers, other grassland researchers, conservation, lands managers, and environmental NGO representatives into the field to where, in areas where my research has taken place, describe what I've seen through the scientific process, and ask them what they've seen in these grasslands in coastal California. They go into the meetings generally with the background thinking, all of them, that conservation management in California's grassland is more challenging than anyone can understand or deal with. And by the end of the meetings, people, having heard each other's perspectives, are empowered. I always root my research in what's possible to achieve at the large-scale level. So when we think about restoring the grasslands in research plots and how that applies at a much larger scale, I must turn to conservation land managers who are used to dealing at larger scales for their perspectives. And I must turn to others like ranchers who understand multi-generationally how those systems work. And so it gives me great hope to hear these different perspectives and how what I've been researching in the grasslands might be applied for restoration in that system.
And I'll ask the question again. How has the use of collaboration affected your work?
So, as Coastal Training Program Coordinator, collaboration affects my work every time I move forward with the training process. I'd say that in my experience, every time I diverge from understanding the needs of the decision makers before I design a program, those programs have failed. Specifically, I could give you a specific example for collaboration affecting my work with one of the several sensitive species trainings that we operate out of our Coastal Training Program with the threatened California red-legged frog. The species is listed by the federal government, and so whenever anybody goes to affect its potential habitat, there are surveys involved in figuring out whether the species is there or isn't there. Our trainings involve the most published researchers that very well understand the species. These researchers have recommended a survey methodology that involves looking for tadpoles of the species, whereas the permitted methodology historically has been looking for adults of the species. The latest science conflicts with what the highest regulators have recommended. As people have begun, 600 people now understand that they should be looking for tadpoles to be effective at finding the species and then protecting the species habitat when they do find the species. The regulators in the last 2 years have been requiring new permittees to look for tadpoles instead of adults. Through the application of this science, we are now seeing set aside of increased areas for the red-legged frog and its protection. Is that? So we've trained through the years 600 people, biological consultants, land managers, agency regulators, about the need to survey for California red-legged frog tadpoles instead of the much harder to find adults. In the process of surveying throughout California using these recommended methodologies, we've seen a huge increase in distribution of the species and knowledge of its range and requirements. So we've been able to protect a lot more areas from basically urban sprawl and poorly planned development by finding this species in many more wetlands throughout, especially coastal California. We've protected not only their wetland habitats, but the areas surrounding those wetland habitats and had set aside from development in those areas. So our goal has been to facilitate the recovery of the red-legged frog through our trainings. And this component of improved survey methodology has gotten us much further along that line. This wouldn't have happened if we'd only facilitated the dialogue directly from the researchers to the regulators. They'd been meeting with the regulators for 25 years with the same story, saying you should survey for tadpoles instead of adults, and they hadn't changed their methodology. It was only after a very large peer network had come to use that methodology and find it effective that this methodology was then rolled into federal requirements for surveying for the species, which has been a huge improvement.